I'm endlessly fascinated and curious about the world around us, about business, about politics, about the arts, about culture, developments, social issues, and the people. Most importantly, about the people that are shaping our future. Every night, I get the opportunity to have conversations, to dive into conversations with thought leaders, with change makers, entrepreneurs, politicians, and everyday heroes who unpack the ideas and stories that I think matter to all of us. What's the future of our economy? What's the future of our country? How do we build stronger communities? What can we learn from music, theater, sports, politics, the arts? How does policy shape our real lives? What does leadership look like, real leadership in today's environment? If it's interesting and relevant and topical and we're talking about it, you'll hear about it here at 6 o'clock on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I want to have real conversations, in-depth conversations. These are ideas we're sharing. This is the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks for joining me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. This week on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960, I've got thoughtful conversations on numerous different stories shaping our world. We've got a powerful week lined up that I want to tell you about, from empathy to leadership to Middle East diplomacy, Canada's housing market, national competitiveness, and personal reinvention. Here's why. On Thanksgiving Monday, I've got a show on empathy is humanity's superpower. As Canadians gather in gratitude this Thanksgiving, I sit down with Dr. Anita Nowak of McGill University, author and leading voice on empathy in business, leadership, and life. We explore why empathy matters now more than ever, the difference between affective, cognitive, and purposeful empathy we discuss, and what neuroscience tells us about actually building our empathy muscle. We connect this to everyday life, families around the table, workplaces that work better, more compassionate politics, and communities that hold together in tough times. As you count your blessings on Thanksgiving, this is a timely conversation about how empathy can bring us all closer together. On Tuesday, we talk about the Middle East, the hostage releases, diplomacy, and some very hard choices. I've got former Canadian Ambassador Israel Vivian Brkoshevich, who joins me to unpack the emotional and geopolitical significance of the release of 20 hostages after 2 years held in captivity by Hamas. We discuss the scenes on the ground in Israel where she is, the relief and scars of prolonged captivity, and the rapid diplomacy that President Trump, Steve Witkoff, etc., achieved in the release in just 10 days. They've been described as a business negotiation, not a political diplomatic negotiation, and maybe that actually works better. We contrast that with Mark Carney's recognition of the Palestinian state and consider what these divergent strategies mean for Canada's role and the prospects of a sustainable peace. We also talk frankly about rebuilding Gaza, the call for denazification-like process that happened in Germany after World War II, and the delicate regional balances with Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Egypt. On Wednesday, we talk about Canada's housing market, the warning signs, and what comes next. I've got Adel Ibawath, the Deputy Chief Economist of the CMHC, and he joins me to map out the pressure points, the rising mortgage delinquencies, the rising numbers of powers of sale, the declining housing starts, and the strains in Toronto's condo market. Not strains, frankly, the disaster in Toronto's condo market. We dig into how interest rates, unemployment, and fiscal deficits are reshaping the landscape, and why capital may be leaving construction, and there may be a lot of layoffs. We're risking a boom-bust cycle that we look forward to. How do we provide investment, reduce development fees, and lift productivity to actually increase supply? If you care about housing affordability, if you care about the next generation, if you care about our dynamic cities, this is a show that you don't want to miss. On Thursday, I've got a really interesting show with Dr. Heather Exner-Perot, talking about constraining Canada, regulation, investment, and the cost of idealism. On Thursday, Dr. Heather Exner-Perot of the Macdonald Institute walks us through her paper about constraining Canada and how we've really restricted Canada from building the things that we need in our country. Her thesis is that environmental protection is essential, but excessive bureaucracy and lawfare have tied up the very projects, energy, critical minerals, even clean infrastructure that we need for growth and prosperity. We examined the Impact Assessment Act, the No Pipelines Ever Again Act, and our dependence on China for critical mineral processing unless we do something in the Ring of Fire, and examples of jurisdictions that are finding a more balanced path forward. We also highlight some promising models like Indigenous-led environmental assessments. And then we widen the lens. We talked about developing poverty, increased poverty in the developing world, in Africa specifically, because well-meaning environmental policies have actually restricted economic growth and investment. It's a candid discussion about how Canada can start building again, responsibly and confidently. And then on Friday, I take a step back and think about ourselves. And we talk about reinvention with Sherry Double, Rise Stronger. We close the week on a note of courage and renewal with Sherry Double. She's an entrepreneur, an author, and a transformation coach, and she shares her remarkable story about burnout and business collapses to surviving a life-threatening medical error and how she transformed adversity into a mission to help others. Out of that struggle, she developed something called the Phoenix Protocol and the Rise Ritual. Recognize, interrupt, shift, and embed. A practical framework for healing, rebuilding confidence, and rediscovering purpose. We talk about mindset shifts that make reinvention real, moving through fear and self-doubt, embracing curiosity and courage, and finding authenticity on the other side of hardship. If you're feeling stuck, or if you're ready for a new chapter in life, this conversation is for you. Join me every night, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on Sauga 960 AM. You can also listen anytime at briancrombie.com. You can catch my videos on my Brian Crombie website on YouTube, and you can follow my podcast on several different podcast platforms. I'm Brian Crombie. Thanks for being with us on the Brian Crombie Show, where I believe thoughtful, long conversations can lead to real, important, lasting change. This week on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Please listen in.